Track 6, Unit 10, Exercise 3. You will hear an interview with a science fiction writer called Jed Stevens. For questions 1 to 7, choose the best answer A, B, or C. You now have 1 minute to look at the questions.
Jed Stevens, welcome to the studio. Now, you've been writing successful science fiction for almost 3 decades, but at what age would you recommend others to start writing it?
That's a good question. I played around with ideas right through my teens, which is fine for your own amusement, but you just don't have the knowledge or scope to take it on seriously until you're out in the world. In your 20s is about right. There are a few writers who have turned to science fiction much later, in retirement, though I see that as risky commercially.
So what led you to science fiction in the first place?
Well, it would be convenient to say it was weekly doses of Star Trek, which was on television when I was a kid, but in actual fact, I couldn't stand it. My elder brother loved it, and he listened to stuff on the radio too, but that didn't work for me. I wanted visual images to stimulate my imagination, and I found them in a colorful comic strip that I consumed every week without fail.
And as a writer, is there anything in particular that has been helpful to you?
To create my stories, do you mean? I guess I've got a lot from locations where I've spent some time. I've never lived in one place for more than 5 years, and unusual environments inspire me. My early work as a programmer was the opposite. No help at all. So I left in the end to follow my dream. Living where I do now, I'm in touch with a lot of scientists, but they're generally too focused on reality to be useful to my brand of fantasy. Interesting people, though.
You've written 25 novels, but what was the very first publication of yours to come out?
It was hard at the start, you know. I desperately wanted to get published, and I remember I tried with a short story, but everyone said they'd only consider a whole collection, so that was out. Then I decided to enter a competition for first novels, but I missed the deadline. I'm still polishing that novel 30 years later. No, it was a modest piece in a magazine about life in other galaxies. From small beginnings, eh?
Well, you obviously found the magic ingredient. And what's the attraction now? I'm sure you don't really need the money.
It's always been the same thrill. Science fiction allows you to find fresh angles on how people live and interact. You mentioned earnings, but they were really only necessary while my kids were growing up. Today, I get by on next to nothing. I know I could make a lot more if I accepted a role in the filming of my stories, but I'm just not into that side of the business.
Jed, if you look back over your 30 years in the business, as you put it, what has changed in science fiction writing?
Strangely enough, given all the technological progress we've seen since the 80s, it's not the storylines themselves that have altered, but the storytelling itself. That's improved hugely in my view. The other aspect that some people comment on is that the novels have become shorter over the years. But I don't think there's any evidence for that. Not in my case, anyway.
Okay. And what do you see happening to the human race in the future? Say, 50 years from now?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but my thoughts are that government funding for space exploration will become more necessary than ever, due to a lack of resources on Earth. I don't think people will be able to get beyond our solar system, but I'm certain that unmanned vehicles will be sent that far, with fascinating results. I also believe that we'll have started exploiting distant places for water by then, on an icy moon of Jupiter, maybe.
Who knows? Jed, it's been really good to talk to you today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Track 7, Unit 12, Exercise 4. You will hear a woman talking about a man called William who built a windmill in his village in Africa. For questions 1 to 10, complete the sentences with a word or short phrase. You now have 45 seconds to look at the questions.
On my radio show today, I'm going to be telling you the amazing story of William. William was born and grew up in a small village in Malawi, in Africa. He wasn't naturally academic at school, and in fact, he had to leave school at the age of 14 because his family couldn't afford to pay the $80 tuition fees. His family were farmers, and they wanted William to become one too, but William had ambitions to be a mechanic. This looked doubtful because the family had no money, and so William had to help out in the fields. He still had some free time, though, so he would spend it in the local library. There he found 2 textbooks, Explaining Physics and Using Energy. And from them, William found out all about how you could get electricity from windmills. William's village was very poor, but it did have a lot of wind. He could see that electricity would solve a number of problems for his family, and, best of all, he would be able to have a light in his room so he could read at night. William could see that having a windmill to make electricity would mean freedom for himself and his family. The electricity would be able to quickly pump water to his family's fields of maize, which would allow them to grow more food. He decided to build a windmill near his house. His father was too busy, so he asked his cousin to help him, and they spent some time trying to find the necessary parts. Luckily, they managed to get hold of a bicycle someone had thrown away, and which they used to form the basis of the windmill. They mainly used the chain and the dynamo. For the windmill blades, they used an old plastic pipe, which they cut in 2 and heated over hot coals to make flat. This all took a long time, but the result was worth it. The windmill was a great success, and currently the village has 3 of them, and the villagers can all go to watch TV, as well as enjoy all the other benefits electricity has brought. William is now older and is keen to build windmills across the whole of his country. William's family can now harvest other crops besides maize, such as potatoes. The people in the village are much healthier and happier than they were before, and other children are beginning to study science, as they can now see how useful it is to their lives.